Hello, everyone. My name is David Lonigan, and I am the Managing Director at Framework Recruitment and the Creative Director at Framework Solutions. Today, I am speaking to William Sharman, who is the co-founder and the company director of Cantifix. So, Will, if you don't mind, could you give us a brief introduction to yourself and the current role?
Yes, good afternoon, David. Yes, and uh, thank you for having me in this interview. Yes, as you said, I'm the CEO of Cantifix. I started Cantifix 38 years ago with an elder brother. So at that stage, wasn't CEO. I was technical director, and my duties were all things technical, design, manufacture, anything that involved machineries and technology. Uh, we co-founded it, as I say, in 1986, all those years ago.
Great year for glazing.
Yeah, just the other day, fresh out of university, where I read engineering at Edinburgh University, so eager to get to make my mark on the world. Charlie, my brother, was building at the time. He was in construction. And actually, it happened to coincide with my parents moving from a large house in the country to a small house in London. And the first thing they needed was you know, a glass extension on the back of their typically Victorian house in Hackney, or what they called Islington. Uh, and they weren't putting up with any old Marsden and Langer type timber construction, which was available. You know, the orangery, the typical
Mm.
timber, glass, polycarbonate roof, orangery or conservatory, was looking for something spectacular, something modern. And in fact, it all started really when they visited what they called Build 2000. And bearing in mind this is 86, so Build 2000 was, what it looked like in the distant future and not just around the corner or 24 years ago. And they saw things made of glass, made of aluminium or metal as they thought it was at the stage, and posed a question really to their two sons, or two out of the five sons, because I have three brothers. And that was, do you think we could build something like this? Charlie, you're a builder. William, you're an engineer. And that's really where it started. We built them something spectacular, and then decided to build other people equally
Well, I
spectacular.
think the greatest innovators are the people who feel pain themselves, right? The people who are like, oh gosh, I need to find a solution, and I guess that's a great origin story for Cantifix, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And then we probably spent the next 5 years persuading English heritage in particular that actually big glass and metal frame structures were actually more in keeping with Victorian London than the timber and polycarbonate. Uh,
Mm.
and that was probably more of a challenge than the construction in the first place.
And over the years, you've played, a myriad of roles. Obviously, with the technical being the technical roles aspect and being the sort of the mainstay. But what would you say the sort of those diverse experiences has changed your approach to be the leader you are today?
I think we started really as a two-man band. We fabricated the kit over the weekend and we installed it during the week. So, uh, I really can safely say to almost every single one of my staff that I have done their job at some stage. Not recently, but you know, I have experience, hands-on from the ground upwards, and I think that makes a huge difference. And I think, you know, the challenges have all been small steps. Uh, we built something large, the largest bit of glass, at the time, and we looked at each other and we said, "Gee, we could build it slightly bigger next time." And that's really how it works. It's not an instant brainwave that comes up with something completely disruptive to the construction industry that says, "Come on, put away your bricks and build it out of four pieces of glass." You try eight pieces of glass first, and then you think, "Well, actually, if I got rid of those two, I could build it in six." and so it goes. So I think, from a leadership point of view, I think it is important that, the roles that I'm mentoring other people for within the business, I have actually done myself.
And do you think that that sort of notion of like, we've done it, like, this is the project we're doing today, and oh, maybe next time we could do it better, bigger. Do you think that's because ultimately during my time at Cantivix, like, that seems to be a sort of, do you think that's a core principle that stayed with the company? Because obviously being a market, you don't get to stay a market leader by resting on your laurels. Do you think that those early foundational projects are whether sort of really impacted how you sort of view the business and the projects?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of our strap lines, if I can't quite remember exactly, that it was something like, what we don't know today, we'll find out so we
Find
can
out
do it
way to do
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Uh,
Yeah.
and it was probably a snappier strap line than that, but that was our attitude. We're not experts at all things, but you know what? Give us time, and we might be. We used to have a few customers who'd say, "Do we have to wait until tomorrow?" Uh, but that was our attitude, and we wanted to be at the forefront of the sort of revolution in glass, and we put it out there to architects and engineers that we were willing to experiment, and if it had to be anybody, it had to be Cantifix. We were very big-headed in those days. We're a bit more grounded now, but
I guess just conversely, what's been, obviously now when you're working on projects like Battersea Power Station, obviously you've got a lot of regulations, a lot of safety checks, a lot of procedures that you have to be very cognizant of. What was the landscape like? The early 90s when was it like, I know often people refer to sort of older times as, was it the Wild West? But like, what's changed in that respect?
yes, in a sense, it was a bit like the Wild West. I mean, there weren't regulations on most building materials, certainly not on glass. When we came into the industry, you built a frame and you stuck glass on top of it, so your frame was holding the glass. You come along with a technique that says there is no frame, and therefore, there are no regulations. I don't mean that we weren't regulated, because building regulations uh, and building control, it's all about safety of the user at the end of it. So you had to make certain that actually there wasn't anything you were doing that would harm the user. But yeah, I mean, it was a glass industry that your typical greenhouse was made out of hundreds of tiny little pieces of glass, and if they got broken, probably didn't do any damage. Uh, Now you've got small, a small number of glass that's huge, and get hit by that, it was a problem. So yes, it was I love the sort of terminology of an engineer is basically there are two means when you're doing engineering. It's either trial or error, or from experience, and you only gain the experience from the initial trial by error before. Uh, and it was a bit like that. I mean, we did a lot of testing. You built something and then you almost tested it to destruction. So before the client moved in, you'd already tried to destroy it, and sometimes you did destroy it to see what would happen, if you broke various bits of it. Glass beams in particular, unlike most materials, with concrete, steel, the answer is, they all have uh, performance data. You can feed it into analysis. Uh, a steel will carry on until it starts to break, and sorry, until it starts to bend. Piece of glass, the problem with that is it has the strength, but you can break it. It's a brittle material. So always in the back of our mind is what should happen if it broke. And this was new times. And then actually, in 1992, I think it was, we actually started uh, drawing up really a guide to structural glazing, which was to become the main sort of textbook for the Institute of Structural Engineers. Previous to that, there really wasn't any guide to building with glass. Uh,
And looking back, what are some of the most like, whether it's a product or project, what are some of the most memorable ones you've been involved in, and particularly in the sort of the challenges in creating new innovations in this sort of in this sector?
I guess it's where you push technology. I mean, glass manufacture was comfortable making small pieces of glass. Someone comes along and says, "I want a big piece," and they have to work out how to do it. And I think probably the first job really that got us involved in this was on Ove Arab's old house in Highgate. His widow was still living there, and Eva Derichner architect, who was a famous Czech, and she'd been building glass staircases for a while, so knew all about building things in glass. She partnered up with an engineer called the Atelier One to design a glass-only building, and picked Cantifix to do it. And I think that was probably the most I guess eye-opening project for us at the time, because actually we became the expert overnight because we'd built one glass building which was one more than anybody else. And having seen it, other architects were now sketching things saying, "I want this." And one of the memorable ones was a scheme for the new shopping mall, the Croydon Centrale, which had two big glass towers, tiny now compared to the sort of glass towers we can build. But at the time, I think they were 15 meters tall, something like that, and the architect came in here or into our office at the time and said, "I want two glass towers. It wants to look as if nothing's supporting them. They're just standing there. What can you do? We know that you're an expert at structural glazing." And, with our hat saying we've built everything that's been structural glazing, we built these two towers. And this was probably, I think it was for Kears at the time. So it was our first sort of tier one contractor who really had no idea about big pieces of glass on site. And, and from that, your reputation grows. We've done lots of glass boxes, lots of structures. We did the refurbishment of the Leicester Square Odeon, another iconic building that wanted a big glass box on the front of it. Let's build that. And I think it grows. And you do a little something unusual, and someone comes along and says, "I want one of those, but bigger."
Well, I remember, like, during my time, I know that the Eva Derichner project was. It felt like another sort of stepping stone. It sort of opened the door in a way that other projects hadn't. But even now, looking back, and I know that, when you take a look at something like Battersea Power Station, I'm of the opinion that in 300 years that'll still look cutting edge. That sort of mixture of the cutting edge design against the brutalist architecture of the power station. It's such an amazing project. But how do you think those projects reflect on the company's vision?
Oh, I think. And you're right. I mean, designing in glass is all about simplicity. So therefore, if you want a company image that says, we're highly qualified, we're technically minded, and we do things amazingly complex, you've then got to explain why you're designing buildings in a very simplistic manner. And I think you're right. I think that these iconic buildings do look great with big bits of glass on it, because it doesn't detract. So Battersea Power Station is all about the chimneys. The fact that we've glazed in the chimneys doesn't really matter. It's all about the chimneys, and the glass is not seen. And I think you get this from certainly when you use very large pieces of glass, you're basically, I think the phrase we coined back in the 1990s was transparent architecture, and that is exactly what it is. It's see-through, and you know what? We've had people come along and commission us to build something spectacular that won't be seen from any direction. You think, well, the challenge there is one that's not necessary what we want to do, but we'd like to build things that everybody can see. I think it does shape you. It makes you a bit humbler because people don't recognize your your great big lump of steel. The angel of the north is, if you made it out of glass, you'd drive up the A1 and you wouldn't even know it was there.
And what do you think? So, like, Cantifix, undisputed market leader, and there's nowhere like getting to the top is never easy in any sector. What's been a not a secret sauce, but what's the yeah? If you could point to something, what is it? What is it that got you there? What keeps you there?
Well, what gets us there is honesty. I was going to say transparency, but that's a terrible thing for a glass company. But we try
Clarity.
maybe clarity. We are honest with our clients. We've always tried to to do the best we can. We've used the best materials available at the moment. We haven't sacrificed our principles to budget, even though that sometimes it's very tempting. And I think we like to feel people come to us and say we've got a perfect project for Cantifix because there's a nice big fat budget on this, and we know that you're expensive. And we say, well, no, we're not. We're just value for money. But I don't think we've got here because we're expensive. We've got here because actually we don't compromise. And I was just looking back before I joined you here, and that I was just looking back at our vision statement. And this sounds as bad as our previous one, but it says to be the global leader in architectural glazing innovation and be recognized as number one for challenging the engineering, technology and design status quo to create groundbreaking installations and products. And I think that sort of it sums it up. And that was our statement. That's where we wanted to go, our target. And to get there, we were going to do that through, as I say, challenging the engineering, technology and design, rather than sticking big bits of glass on things. So I think it's, we've always prided ourselves in the fact that, we employ technologic-minded people. We have engineers who know what they're talking about. As I say, we use the latest materials. Glass technology has changed significantly in, well, probably 30 years of our 38, because of the demand for larger pieces of glass and quality. If you're going to put something that's transparent, you've got to make certain it's not got scratches and marks all over it.
I think the pricing, the bit about pricing about that, then that sort of, oh yeah, Cantifix are expensive. I think there's there's this hangover and there's this sort of connective tissue to for want of the double glaze. Like this isn't double glazing, this isn't white gold, and ultimately this isn't it is a company about value, not about price. If you want it, because ultimately, as you say, these things are so highly engineered. The amount of brain power, the amount of engineering, the amount of the calculations, the quality, the engineering that goes behind delivering something like a Bow Platty station isn't something that can be found on price. But I just guess ultimately in a market that's had, it's been quite tumultuous in the last sort of 2-3 years, because post-COVID, I think there was a worry that it would be a race to the bottom, and then sort of the opposite happened. But then you've had some sort of stealth taxes with regards to sort of rents and energies that sort of, you can understand, especially when you start dealing with tier one, why they love a better return on their investment. But ultimately, you can't be chasing, when you're delivering these projects, it's not about chasing price, is it?
No, it's not. And the success of the project can hinge on fairly small amount of little tiny details, and that might be using a glass supplier that we know can get it right. I mean, last year we installed a 20-meter piece of glass. Now a 20-meter piece of glass comes from one supplier only.
Was it Tivitec?
No, it wasn't actually. It was a company called CDAC in
CDAC,
Germany. And you've only got, and when you're installing it, you've only got one go at it. It's either installed looking beautiful, or it's in pieces on the floor. and it's not really about that piece of glass. You can't relate the cost of that piece of glass to a bit that you have in your window in your bathroom. You know, you've got an expensive piece of glass. There were three cranes in the whole of the UK that could have lifted it, all of which were working on an HS2 site. So we had to borrow it from HS2 in Cornwall, sorry, in the Midlands, and ship it to Cornwall to put this piece of glass in. You know,
Yeah, that's
surely,
not.
surely your £30,000 a day crane, you know, isn't there a better way of doing it that will save this money? The answer is no. And as you say, you know, all these small things add up to a large cost at the end. But I think it's the not compromising on that. Yes, we could have tried to do it by hand, but it wasn't going to work. Um, and the only way of doing it was to do it properly. And I think it's, you know, schemes like this, there isn't a cheap budget way of doing it. You either do it, the budget way is not to do it. You know, stick it in 21-meter piece of panels and glass, and it, it it's simple. No
Yeah,
crane,
yeah.
simple. Every glass supplier in Europe can manage that. And I think, you know, the strength of our reputation is that, you know, we know what we're doing. You know, we can quote for a 20-meter piece of glass because, you know, we have the credibility that in the end it will be in. It'll be in one piece and look fantastic.
Been there, done that,
Yeah,
eh?
yeah. And if you
Yeah,
go to the
absolutely.
Emily Hobhouse Museum in St Ives, you know, step back and appreciate the 20-meter piece of complete transparency. In fact, you look at it and go, there isn't a piece of glass there at all, is there? Yeah.
So, with over 30 years, what would you say is the sort of like the top five skills and crucial to success in sort of leading a team, especially with regards to, like, you know, with the designers, the engineers?
I think enthusiasm is what it is. Enthusiasm for the challenge. You know, yes, we do projects that aren't highly challenging, but you know, we're renowned for our being able to take up the challenge. And I think we put together a team that are equally in love with challenge, equally in love. I mean, glass is a fantastic product to play around in. And you've really got to love your product. And I think it's so easy to love. Uh,
I
and
remember the first day when I came, I wasn't, you know, I think it was there was no preconceptions. I walked through the door and you just immediately the aesthetic just grabs you because we all live in a house. You know what it is to live in a house and to have those sort of these transformative. Your imagination is blown away. I think everyone can connect to the aesthetic alone. I think you'd be.
but I think one of the things that is really every role within Cantifix needs talent. You know, there isn't a role that you can put somebody who isn't talented on saying it's okay because all they're doing is picking up nails and bringing them over here. You know, actually every part of the project, whether it's the initial putting together a budget or the assessing the risks to the end result of polishing it clean and you know we always used to uh, we thought it was a nice touch. We always used to provide a bottle of champagne and two hand blown glasses uh, in the days of of the you know the residential property, but we don't do that any longer. Maybe we should go back to it. But you know, even down to that sort of wishing the client a happy life with their dream, you know, it requires a talented workforce. Um, and if you say what is the secret is we employ talented people and
Hmm.
we keep talented people because we have projects that are stimulating and fun to work on.
Yeah, tip of the spear, right?
Yeah.
Especially with a skill gap that we have that's just constantly is profound. Yeah, retention is your smartest tool. Um, if you were giving someone advice, well, look, you've taken fair taken part in your sort of good amount of good interviews and bad interviews. What would you say are the key things for a successful interview? If someone comes into Cantifix and you want them to be successful in the interview, what advice would you give them?
Show your interest. Uh, know your know your subject. You know, we are all about technology. Come with a knowledge of technology and show an interest. I always say at the end of an interview, what is it you want to ask about Cantifix? And actually, it really doesn't matter as long as you have something to ask about Cantifix. And if they come up and say, that project that I could see on your website, that's fantastic. How did you do this? Because it's, that's what I'm looking for. The interview at the end says, no, I think you just about covered it, has blown it in my mind.
Yeah.
Because
so with that in mind, what are there's the positives. What are the red flags? What are the not to dos with a Cantifix interview?
I think not to do. Well, actually, there's very little not to do. I mean, apart from to say I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about,
or interest,
because I can teach people about glass. That's the bit that I can teach them about. I can't teach them to have fantastic CAD skills. I can't teach them that they, when they go back and read about the latest glass technology, or they have an interest in the REBA awards and have a look at the open buildings that you can go and see. That's the bit that I can't teach them. I can't teach them their enthusiasm. But if they've got that enthusiasm, I can teach them all about glass. I can bore them silly about glass. And actually, somebody who says, look, I know nothing about glass, but I've designed in concrete and I'm bored of steel, and I keep looking over my shoulder and seeing these glaziers over there doing a fantastic job. That's what I want. Is it okay if I know nothing about glass? Absolutely. So, the red flag is not knowledge about glass. The red flag actually is I couldn't care less, and I'm not particularly enthusiastic about working for you anyway.
I remember actually you did my second interview, and I do remember just the level, you might say that, but the level of scrutiny. I remember it was like, why do you want to work here? And I gave it, no, why do you want to? No, and I really like, it's one of those things, it felt like once you get past it, it's like, yes.
Yeah.
But but it has to be, especially when, as you say, you don't want to be wasting time on people who, are just going to be sitting on a seat, like bum on a seat. You don't need a bum on a seat, do you?
And the fantastic accolade you have, David, is that you were offered the job and came to work for it. So, yeah, absolutely. Actually, you asked, the technique really is you ask the same question 3 times, and on the third answer, you get the real answer. First answer, you get the one that they think you want.
The PR, yeah.
Yeah. The second answer is the one that they think they perhaps should give, and the third one is the one that actually they haven't prepared themselves as the real one that comes out.
I just need the money. Yeah.
And actually, from a recruitment point of view, you're right. I do the last interview, working on the principle that everybody else has loved them. I'm there to find out whether I really do or not. And I think one of the important things about having your own business is actually being able to choose the people you want to work with. So on the whole, I've never employed somebody I don't like.
I think I get often asked, due to my position now, sort of what are the skills that people should have for glazing and architectural glass, etc. And I think the personality is much more important, because obviously the right skills can be taught to the right personality. And you're right, it's about talent, and people who just want it. I think that's the people who are driven.
Yeah. You can tell quite quickly whether actually the answers you're being given are just a off the cuff pat. This is what you want to hear, and working. I spend so much of my time in the office environment. I want to work with people I like. And that is tremendously important.
And lastly, look, thank you so much for today, Will. Should we just touch lightly on so we're collaborating on a sort of educational initiative, because ultimately unlike the other niches in construction, that it's very hard to create, that there's no linear path outwards from education straight into our sector. How important do you think those things are?
Oh, I think it's hugely important. As you said, I mean, if you want to be a plumber or a carpenter, there is a course, there's a qualification, there's a training. If you want to be a glazier, in particular, the sort of thing in our sort of industry, there is no path. There is no training. And over the years, the training is done by me and my team, finding the right people. And there is a shortage of skills, definitely. I think there is a shortage of young, eager people who have been brought up with grand designs and seeing these fantastic things, but just don't know how to get involved in it. And I think the to me in particular, I've gained so much from the industry. I came into it as we started this thing, as an engineer, not knowing anything about glass, and all the knowledge I've gained is it's sucked up from other people, or made up myself. And I think that the knowledge, the experience, the talent that I might have, and colleagues of mine and associates of mine, it's hugely important to feed these back. It's hugely important that actually youngsters leaving school, gosh, I sound like an oldie now, youngsters leaving school, but
These whippersnappers.
I have three children who are over 30 now, so school leavers are very young to me. And actually, if we can help them in any way, if we can persuade them that the glazing industry is a great industry to be in, you've always got IT hanging over you saying, come to me, video games. Yes, we can do that at home. We can make loads of money. We're always going to have buildings. We're going to have properties, and we're going to have glass.
We will be putting buildings. We will putting glass and aluminium are the building materials of the future. Whereas if you want to get into software development now, it'd be like, can you guarantee we'll need software developers in 5-10 years? I'm not so sure with the way AI is working. Whereas the aluminium glass will be they'll just be more commonplace.
And if we can stimulate that market in any way we can, I'm behind the initiative 100%.
Will, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Pleasure.
Right,
Thank
Will, thank you so much, man.
you.